I'm going to continue today along the lines of my last video, which is whether you should prioritize protein or prioritize fat on a low-carb, carnivore type way of eating. And I'm going to continue because I realized I forgot a lot of the nitty-gritty in the last video. So this will be part 2. And I want to start with a statement that says, I want you to think of your body as a bank, and the macronutrients of carbohydrates, fat, and protein as different types of bank accounts. Fat and carbohydrates are what your body prefers to use as energy. You can get energy from protein, but it's a thermogenic effect because it actually takes more energy to convert the protein to energy than it does than you get from it. So that is actually a way to help you lose some weight, is to eat more protein. But number one, when I say prioritize protein, I'm not really talking about prioritizing protein. I'm talking about prioritizing amino acids, which are the building blocks of lean body mass. And some would say, in fact, Dr. Michael Eads and his wife, Dr. Mary Dan Eads, say that protein is the most essential macronutrient of all. And of course, like, I agree with them that carbohydrates are not essential at all if you're on a low-carb, carnivore way of eating, or even if you're on a low-carb at all. Nobody needs carnivores, period. No matter what way of eating you're on. You will become a low-carb person if you don't eat them, but they are not essential in any way, shape, or form. But if I'm going to say amino acids are the building blocks of lean body mass, then we probably should define lean body mass, and that's basically anything in your body that's not fat. So it's protein, it's the skeletal muscle, it's the bones, it's the organs, it's the vessels, it's the cartilage, it's the skin, the gastrointestinal tract, so all your intestines, colon, stomach, all that stuff, liver, heart, brain, it's all lean body mass. And if protein breaks down to amino acid, and amino acids are the building blocks of lean body mass, then you want to make sure you have a big reserve of lean body mass. That's why I say it's your retirement account. And when do you need the most amino acids? Is when you're young and when you're old, which in this case means over 30. So yes, that's not real old, but that's when you need to be ensuring anywhere from 30 up. You need to be increasing your protein to increase your amino acids too. And I'll get into more details as we go along, but you got to have that retirement account full when you need to draw it down. Okay, so I've said as you age, in this case over 30, you need more lean body mass. It works like an IRA, and carbs and fat are more like a daily in and out energy source. Should have worn my in and out shirt, but I'm on my new shirt, Real Life Tour, I think it says at the bottom anyway. One of the very frequent questions when you talk about protein is there a maximum amount, or can you overeat protein? And I would say ask a bodybuilder that. They eat enormous amounts of protein. And you can go to a dialysis center and there's not a long line of bodybuilders going in to get, so you know, there's kind of two sides to overeating protein. There's the myth that it hurts your kidneys, and there's the myth that it will make you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Both of them are inaccurate. Yes, I'm not sure, oh here it is, the next thing on my thing. Okay, so if you eat fattier meat to satiety, you should get at least the 30 grams of protein which you need to get the 3 to 5 grams of leucine, which is a very essential amino acid that I think you make very, very small amounts of. But the reason you need to get 30 grams per meal in a short amount of time is that that's the protein threshold that activates leucine, which is something along the mTOR pathway that helps your muscles, that activates your muscles, the protein threshold or the amino acid threshold that activates your muscles to grow. And why would you want muscles to grow? Because, well, I'm sure I got that later on, but let me just say, you need at least 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine at any age, and older and younger need 3.5 grams per meal, which is a higher level because as you age you need more. I'm 60 now, so increasing, but I was going to say, can you overeat? And no, not if you're eating fattier meat. If you're eating lean meat, you might be able to overeat protein, but you probably won't because it doesn't taste as good. So there's kind of a built-in stopgap. If you're eating properly, you get satisfied, or satiety, you get where you don't feel hungry. So it's kind of hard to overeat protein, but there have been studies on, or just in general, you can look at bodybuilders and they're always drinking protein shakes and adding more and more protein to get those big muscles because they need a lot of amino acids, which they're really eating it for the amino acids. But the catch here is you have to have enough fat to keep the gallbladder working. Gallstones are from not enough fat to trigger the bile release, though often your doctor will tell you you're eating too much fat because you were on a low-fat diet and your bile wasn't released and it concentrated. And what happens when a liquid concentrates? Your liver drips a little bit of bile out every day, and you need bile, or every hour or minute, whatever it is. It's a slow trickle. Your gallbladder holds it until it needs it to help digest and process fat. If you never empty that, then it builds up and it concentrates, and almost any liquid you have, when you concentrate, you get crystals. So how do you get stones? You get stones by not eating fat. But then when you up your fat intake and that bile squeezes all the, the gallbladder squeezes all the bile out, then you're like, ow, it's because there's a stone in there and it's blocking the hole, or it shoots through and it's painful. But that's really because you have not eaten enough fat on a regular basis. So to some extent, prioritizing protein is actually also prioritizing fat. So we really need to look at both sides of that coin as the same coin, you know. Okay, so, and I watched a video by the Drs. Eads and Dr. Westman, and then one with Amy Berger, and both Marianne and Michael Eads, MDs. And they say basically the same thing, but Dr. Westman likes to ask people a question: what are we made of? And the Eads, of course, responds, 100% protein. And like I said earlier, almost everything in your body is protein. I think fat is even, it could have protein. I don't know, it's probably not, because they're separate macronutrients. So all of your lean body mass is protein. I don't think fat is protein, but I don't know, they didn't go into that. And the Dr. Eads wrote a book called Protein Power, which is copyrighted in 1997. I have not read it, but they discuss it a lot, and that's how they, so that was a long time ago. You know, that was almost 30 years ago, and they knew the secrets then. They were probably a little bit ahead of Dr. Atkins, actually, in doing this in a clinical setting. But of course, Dr. Atkins died, so he's not here to talk about it anymore. Not from eating protein or carbs. He apparently slipped on the ice in New York winter and hit his head and died from a cranial bleed or something like that. But, and then the question from low carb, well, LCHF is low carb, healthy fat, or high fat. there's a big debate on whether you should be healthy fat or high fat. And I think if you're eating saturated fat, you're both. So saturated fat is a healthy fat, even though the media won't tell you that. And it's also high fat, and it's also very critical in your body. Okay, so I like that the eats say, keep carbs low, then you don't have to worry about the rest of it. You don't have to fine tune, you don't have to deal with minutia, you don't have to worry about mTOR because it's downstream from another thing that if you have high ketones, it reduces your mTOR, because there is some talk, and I'm not going into it in depth because I really don't know it all on mTOR, but Dr. Michael Eads said people bring up that mTOR causes cancer to grow, and he said, yes, that's true in a standard American diet. If you have cancer, there's nothing about mTOR that causes cancer. It's just, if you have cancer, mTOR, and it's some long word, you know, it's an acronym. But it's something about, I'm not even going to try to think of what it is, but he says if you're in ketosis, which you generally are if you're low enough carb, then there's something, I guess, the ketones are made of acetone and something biphosphate, or I don't know what it's called, but butyrate is what it's called. I do know what it's called, it just didn't come out. But anyway, apparently when acetone is made, it makes something that is upstream and kind of counteracts the effect of mTOR. So the hope of us on low carb ketogenic diets is that we won't get cancer because of the way we're eating. And you know, then people will point to Dr. Sarah Hallberg, who was the chief medical officer of Virta when I was a patient there. She died of lung cancer. But what's often overlooked in the discussion was she was a vegan and vegetarian for a decade or more before she found low carb, carnivore, keto. So there is such a thing as damage that cannot be undone, even though we all like to think, well, if we change it, we'll fix it. That may or may not be true. Let me see where I was at here. Okay. The other question or concern about high protein is that it will raise your glucose. It doesn't actually raise your glucose, but it could marginally raise your insulin, which generally is raised by a raise in glucose. And Dr. Eads has, Mr. Eads, I should call him Mr. and Mrs., so that one I don't have to keep saying Michael or Mary Dan, yeah. Anyway, protein can be converted into glucose. That's through a process called gluconeogenesis. But what he stressed was that it is a pull phenomenon, which means if you need sugar, it will pull, and there's no stores in your body other than protein. The liver or pancreas or wherever it's made, or maybe I think it's both, or starts in one and goes to the other, something like that, will pull the protein in, break off stuff to make, I think it's carbon or nitrogen or something, and turn some of that, whatever it's left or using or whatever, to make glucose through the process called gluconeogenesis. So ultimately, it is, because you have to have a certain amount of glucose in your body at all times, you don't have to consume it, because your body will make it. And that's another part of the process that somehow lowers inflammation, which makes it harder for diseases and viruses and all that kind of stuff to live in your body. But it is definitely not caused by eating too much, in air quotes, protein. Unless you are a type 1 diabetic, then it is a pull phenomenon, and you have to dose more insulin if you up your protein too much. So I'm basically talking today the people that are not type 1 diabetics. If you're type 2 or pre-diabetic or somewhat metabolically healthy, then there's nothing wrong. There's no upper limit to the amount of protein you can eat, as there's no well, there kind of is an upper limit to the amount of fat, because once you use up all the bile you have, then your body can't really process it, so it excretes it, which can be a disaster if you don't know it's coming, and you'll know it's coming. Okay, but ultimately, and this is point number 12, I haven't been labeling them, you don't have to measure or count macros unless that helps you achieve whatever goal you want to achieve. So, or unless you're really nerdy and anal and you just have to have data for everything, which I kind of am sometimes. So I do, I wrote it down, I do use MyFitnessPal to track protein and fat protein percentage. At least this past week, when I'm trying to up my protein, make sure I'm getting at least 30 grams per sitting, per meal basically. But we eat in grams, not percentages, so percentages are challenging in just a conversation like this. But basically, if you follow Dr. Westman's page 4, or you can even Google the Banting diet, Banting, which I did, and ultimately I found out that the Banting diet was like around 1900, and we've been using it ever since, but we call it low carb or keto or carnivore today. Mr. Banting, I think, was a mortician who had trouble losing weight all of his life, and then he found that if he upped his protein, got into ketosis, he could lose weight. So basically, since around 1900, with minor tweaking, it's the same diet. It is not the diet for the keto diet for epilepsy treatment, which is very strict on how much protein and carbs you can have. And that's because it's treating a neurological disorder. We don't want to follow that one unless you have epilepsy. Okay. And the main thing, both the video with Dr. Westman and Amy Berger were kind of question answer things with Mr. and Mrs. Eads. And what they were asked, after 40 years of this, do you still stick with protein as more important or fat as more important? Mrs. Eads said, well, they both said absolutely protein is more important. But if you're going to go carnivore, let me see if I wrote it down here. That meat provides everything you need, and a carnivore diet is when you will convert some of the protein into sugar via the gluconeogenes, but just enough to live from, and from your consumed protein, not your skeletal muscle mass. And that's the big concern, is that you'll start eating up your lean body mass if you don't have enough protein. And that may be true if you don't have enough, but you have enough. And that they both stress that you need to eat more fat if you're on a true carnivore, which is a no carb way of eating. So ultimately, even if you're prioritizing protein because it's very low in caloric count, you're going to need the fat to not put you in a humongous. I mean, if I just ate 30 grams of shrimp, which has 0 fat, I'd get about 600 calories. That's not enough for me for a meal. And we can go down the caloric deficit path, but Mr. Eads often mentioned if you're in a caloric deficit, then you'll be in ketosis, which I think that's true because you're getting the extra calories from your internal fat stores. But in their book, and if I didn't mention it earlier, you can Google Protein Power by Dr. Michael Eads or Dr. Mary Ann Eads, or both of them. And there are some free PDF downloads on the internet if you want to read it on your computer, not have to buy a book. But in the book, and I haven't read it, they just mentioned it, they have what they call 3 levels of commitment. And then she mentioned grass-fed, grass-finished, organic, all that stuff's good if you can afford it and it's local and it's available. but it's not necessary. But they did have, a strict level where you're almost as low carb as possible. Then they had like a keto level where you add some vegetables and green stuff. Green vegetables is what they call it, which is pretty much anything other than starches. I learned that this week too. And then they had the level where if you want coffee and wine, So as I keep saying, it depends. It depends on your level of comfort. It depends on your illnesses or diseases and how much you want to reverse, or your weight, if you just want to lose weight. But they kept saying if you just limit the carbs, the rest doesn't matter that much. Because Mr. Eads even said, we had our patients, they ran 4 what he called the predecessors to the current urgent care, but he said they kind of turned into basically family practice locations where you don't need an appointment and you just come in and they treat you as a family practice. They probably didn't have x-rays, and they may have had sutures, I don't know, they may have done stitches and stuff, but I'm sure anything major you were sent off to a larger, more advanced facility. But he said he had a lot of the patients track their intake, and he said some of the diets were pretty bad, but as long as they lowered the carbs, they had massive success. So whether you choose to prioritize protein or prioritize fat, or call yourself a carnivore or a ketovore or a keto person or a paleo or a lion diet or whatever you want to call yourself, just lower the carbs if you want to achieve your success. If you're still here, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment down below, or give me a like. Yeah, I guess that is a thumbs up. Or subscribe, that's real. I got 4 new subscribers in the last 3 days. That's exciting. Thank you for your time. I hope this was beneficial. God bless. Bye-bye.